Thank you, Senator Hyde-Smith. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here, and thanks for your great work and the way you engage with Congress, even when members disagree with you. It's always substantive and respectful, and I just wanted to observe that it's not that easy to do, so good job on that. I just want to quickly agree with Senator Murray about the Office of the Solicitor, especially as it relates to child labor. We can disagree about a lot. But the law already exists, and it is not sufficiently enforced. You've got around 100 meritorious cases that we are unable to prosecute per month, and there's a solution to that. We don't need a new statute. But I actually want to talk to you about an area where we do need a new statute. Senator Young and I also have a child labor bill that does something a fair amount more narrow than Senator Murray and Senator Casey, and that is simply crank up those penalties. As you know, it is $68,801 maximum penalty for a child labor violation that results in the death of a child. 68 grand is what we have in federal statute. And so not only have companies made the judgment that between the Office of the Solicitor and overall resources for the department, that they may not get caught. But even if they get caught, it's not that expensive. And it can be booked as a cost of doing business. If a child dies on a factory floor, it's 68 grand, capped. So, I'm sorry to take such a long time to wind up, but I'd like you to talk about the practical impact of those penalties and what would happen if those penalties were turned up to the point where it was, a real financial hit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator. I mean, I can't say it better than you've already said it. When employers feel like breaking the law can just be a cost of doing business because the consequences, even when they're caught, are so minimal, the incentives to comply are too poor. And we do everything we can at the Department of Labor through our investigative resources to expose illegal practices, to hold all of the companies who are responsible accountable. But we do appreciate the efforts of Congress in light of all of the attention to child labor and the cases that we continue to see to do everything in your power to help make it more costly for those who break the law.
Thank you very much. And I guess I just want to reiterate this point. It's labor, right? So we're going to have a difference of opinion on a lot of things about independent contractors and about union organizing and regulatory questions. But I think we can all agree that there's no justification for a violation of federal law being so inexpensive as to not be a disincentive. And so this is something that I just think we ought to fix. We can either pass it by consent or in some other must-pass piece of legislation, but this is not the kind of thing that ought to get caught up in our pretty fundamental ideological disagreements. Speaking of fundamental ideological disagreements, here I move on to the Women's Bureau. I am continually impressed. And I have to say, I talk to my staff, and I'm always suspicious about bureaus because our tendency on our side of the aisle is to identify a problem and then establish a bureau for the thing we want to see fixed. And so they had to persuade me that this Women's Bureau was not just 7 people in a bunch of cubicles, but boy, they've done really important work. And I'd like you to just spend a little bit of time talking about what the Women's Bureau has done for the workforce and for women in the workforce.
Thank you very much for that, Senator. So I think it's important to say that in many ways, women have helped to power the economic recovery that we have seen in this country. Last month, the labor force participation rate for prime-age working women reached an all-time high, a high since we started collecting this data, which was back in 1948 when Harry Truman was elected president. So the role of women in this economy simply cannot be overstated. At the same time, we have much more work to do to tap into the full potential of women in the economy. And one of the studies that the Women's Bureau put out that I think is so important to note here is that if our country invested in a care infrastructure and policies that support care like national paid leave, then about 5 million more women could enter the workplace, and that would result in $775 billion worth of economic activity a year. So Women's Bureau's research and work in this space helps to tell us not just, what policy, the impact of policies, but also what's happening when we don't invest in policies. The other piece that Women's Bureau puts out are grants called WANTO. They're Women Apprentices in Non-Traditional Occupation. And it is meant to make sure that women see themselves in some of these good jobs that are being created that they have been underrepresented in for a very long time. I also feel like I need to say, because you asked about the Women's Bureau and it's almost Mother's Day, that I want to thank all the working mothers who do this work. And our Women's Bureau is very much about continuing to lift up their voices and their stories and opportunities for them.
Thank you.